So yesterday we started seeing this mimer, this essay on Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. And we mentioned a little bit about how important faith in it is, because it changes the way that you live. Okay. So now I wanted to get into something that Rav Yitzchak explained about this, which is very, very deep. And the way to see this is to look just at the words chelek la'olam haba, right? That Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek la'olam haba. So what does it mean that you have a portion in the world to come? How should you understand the word portion?
Mana. It certainly means you don't get all of it.
Okay. So the remez here is by taking the initials of these three words. Chelek la'olam haba. What do the initials spell?
Chala.
Chala. We were talking about chala before. Did I mention it or you mentioned it? I don't know.
You mentioned
I mentioned it because it's on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what does chala literally mean?
A piece.
No, that's chelek.
Uh,
Chala literally means in Aramaic sweet,
okay.
something that's sweet. So that's why we make chala on Shabbos, because it's like, in a certain sense, Shabbos is like the world to come. It's like your chelek la'olam haba. And we call it me'ein olam haba, right? The question is whether we're calling it me'ein olam haba in the sense of olam haba is the Garden of Eden, or are we calling it olam haba in the sense of the world of the resurrection? So it depends which part of Shabbos you're talking about. If you're talking about Shabbos night, evening, so it says in the Zohar that every Shabbos has two Shabboses. It simply is that the Friday night is like the seventh day. It's like the rest from all your toil during the week. So what do you receive on Friday night? Where do you go on Friday night? So in a certain sense, you're receiving the reward for all of your toil. And on Shabbos day, you already... So on Shabbos night, you're finished with all your toil. And then you go to sleep. You wake up in the morning and then you forgot about everything. It's no longer there. So it's a different Shabbos altogether. So both of them have aspects of, meaning it's hard to say which one is more like Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, which one is more like the reward for your toil. We said yesterday that Olam Haba, the world of resurrection, is a reward for your toil, for the mitzvahs that you did. Okay? I don't think we stress this enough. But mitzvah in general is called tzedakah. Right? We know this from the Yerushalmi. It's quoted many times in the Tanya.
And today's status.
A tzaddik is a person who does mitzvos. A tzaddik is not a holy person. It's not the same thing. He doesn't even have to be learned. Because a tzaddik is somebody who does mitzvos. So tzedakah is the general name of a mitzvah. So the world of resurrection is where you receive the reward for all of the toil that you did, all of the mitzvos that you did. But the Garden of Eden, we said, is just a chance to go deeper into the learning that you did in this world that you didn't complete. That you began to see it, but you didn't finish it. So there's two different challahs, as it were. There's sweetness of the learning. We mentioned this yesterday. So that's one type of challah. The other type of challah is the reward. It's sweetness of reward.
So you're saying that you don't eat sweet challah for anything?
Why? No, I'm saying both of them have both aspects. It's hard to say which is which. So that's one way of understanding why you have to have two pieces of challah in each meal. Okay? Because each of the meals has both the challah, that's sweetness, in the sense of the pnimius of the Torah, meaning the Torah that you didn't complete but now you're completing, and it also has the sweetness of the reward. In any case, challah means sweetness, and we know from the Baal Shem Tov that he has this his progression of every type of spiritual transformation or ascent goes through 3 stages that he calls achna'ah avdalam taka, or submission, separation, and sweetening. The final stage is always called sweetening. Okay, so that's the challah. The challah is like the final stage. And that's chelek la'olam haba. It's a beautiful acronym. That it's there's a, if you want, how many challahs do you put on the table?
12, I'm not sure.
So the Alter Rebbe had 12 on his table, but in the Shulchan Aruch, because he wanted it to be shaveh l'chol nefesh, it should be for everybody, so he wrote to put only 2. But a lot of people do or are makpid on 12. It's a beautiful gematria that you can do, very simple. You take each one of the letters of challah, chet, lamed, and hey, and you do the triangular value of it. Triangular value is what's called, it's not called triangular value in Kabbalah. It has a different name. I don't remember what it's called right now. But what you do is you calculate the sum of the numbers up to that number. So chet is 8, right? So you have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 equals 36, right? The number of candles that you light on Chanukah, 36 tzaddikim, right? Lamed is 30, so it's 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way to 30. So how much is that? So the quick calculation is 30 times 31 divided by 2. It's n times n plus 1 divided by 2. So it's 15 times 31. How much is 15 times 31?
Tell me.
I don't know.
310 plus half 310, which is 105, so it's
415, right? And then you have the hay, and the hay 1 till 5 is altogether 15. So you do 415 plus 15 is 430, plus we have 36. Didn't come out right. It's not 415. How much is it? 31 times 15, so 10 times 310, and 5 times 31 is 155. So that sounds better. So 310 plus 155. So that's 465. Plus 15, that's 480. Right? Plus 36, now it came out, 516. Okay? 516 is 12 times challah. Challah itself is equals to 43. So it's a beautiful remez that you should put for 12 challahs on the table on Shabbos.
So why you don't do it?
I'm not a makubal.
No wonder your wife is afraid of it.
I'm afraid for my wife. Even the people that do that, unless they have their rebbe, they have to feed like 50 people, or 100 people, or 1,000. They make little tiny things that are kazais. They don't make them into like these big things. In any case, we probably eat enough challah anyway. It's almost like 12. But now there's a big machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban about the world to come, the world of the resurrection. As far as the Rambam is concerned, he made it into a principle of faith. He said, if you don't believe in this, then you're a heretic. You're a min. He doesn't mention that it has to be from the Torah, I believe. He just mentions that, that you have to believe in. But the Rambam explains that in his philosophical world, we talked about this many times, the end of all existence, the purpose of all existence, is spirituality, is the philosophical mindset, is the development of a person's das, of his consciousness, of his knowledge of God. But so because of that, what does he say? He says that really the end, the goal of life is the state of the soul without the body. So why do I have this thing called the resurrection of the dead? What good is that? So he says it's a time period, it's a limited time period, it's not eternal. It's a limited time period in which you get reward for what you did in this world. That everybody agrees on. But he says it's a limited, you live again for 70, 80 years, but these 70, 80 years, you pass away like Moshe Rabbeinu, like in Parshas Hazinu, right at the end, Hashem says to him, pass away like Aaron did, and Moshe very much wanted to pass away that way, so you close your eyes and and you leave the world, and that's it. And the whole thing, he says, is because you can't give a reward just to the consciousness, to the soul. You have to give the reward to the consciousness within the body. Because that's how the person did the mitzvot. He didn't do the mitzvot just by thinking about them. He didn't do the mitzvot when he was in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. He did the mitzvot in the real physical world. So the reward has to be of the same type as the action. So the action was physical, the reward has to be physical. So it says the Rambam, that's how he explains what the world of resurrection is. Because God has to give a reward for what was done, so he puts the soul back together with the body. That's the resurrection. And it lives for 70, 80 years in this perfect world, and it enjoys everything. And then it goes back to being just a soul. And the body is, we don't care. That's the Rambam's point of view. The Ramban says, Chaz v'shalom, terrible thing to say. How can you say that? And again, it comes from a different outlook on what the purpose of life is. He says, no, the purpose of life is to do mitzvos. You want to tell me that after the resurrection of the dead, you're pater from the mitzvos, right? B'metim chofshi, it's no longer a mitzvah. But it's explained in Chassidus, just because it's not a mitzvah doesn't mean you don't do it. Meaning it's still the purpose of the world. Okay? And it might be that they'll take on whole new meanings that we can't even imagine right now. And these meanings don't work when they're commanded. They just have to be done out of your goodwill, out of the fact that you want to do them. So Nachmanides, the Ramban, he looks at the world of resurrection, he defines it completely differently. He says, no, it's not the reward for what you did in this world. It's the goal of this world. It's where you want to reach. And once you're there, it's eternal. It doesn't end. Now, why does the Rambam in the end say that, why couldn't the Rambam also say that it's eternal? What's the big deal? So your reward will be eternal. So the Rambam explains, he says it can't be eternal. Why can it not? Because he says his whole shita, his whole system of education is that when you teach someone, you have to wean them off the need for reward, right? He says you only do this for women and young children, right? You tell them there's a reward at the end of the work that you're doing, so it's worth it to do it. But eventually a person's supposed to understand that the reward is the work itself, and so he doesn't need the reward. But Hashem doesn't want you to go away without paying you back for what you did. So you have to have the world of resurrection. But really that can't be the goal, because then that completely uproots this whole system. It says that...
So according to the Rambam Shita, the world of resurrection could be all the time. It could have been already 1,000 years ago when a certain number of souls come back and they live and nobody can tell the difference between them and anybody else. Then they die like everybody else.
Theoretically. But I don't know if have you ever seen somebody who had no problems at all in their life and then they just went to sleep and didn't wake up? Maybe there are people like that. I don't know. I've never heard.
Maybe they'll live on some little island somewhere.
Could be. Maybe they live on a different planet. Who knows? But that's where you get into this. I'm glad you brought it up, because it sort of shows something about the philosophical outlook that's otherworldly. It's not really related to our world. There's something wrong with it. I can't exactly place it. But if you think that the end-all and be-all of human life is just in the consciousness, then you're missing something. You're missing something very down-to-earth about human life. That, again, the way Nachmanides sees it, and the way that Chassidus obviously went in the direction of Nachmanides, not according to the Rambam, the way that Nachmanides sees it is that the physical existence is not superfluous. It's not some kind of imtsayi, some kind of means to an end. It's part of the end. It's part of the goal. Okay. So now this brings up a tremendous thing, because when you think about what does chala really mean? Okay. So according to the Rambam, chelek la'olam haba is almost derogatory. Okay. It's almost saying, if you, it's not almost, he says it outright, I'm just toning it down. He says it outright. He says if a person is serving God in this world, in order to get that portion in the world to come, so he's not much better than an animal. He doesn't get it. Again, because Hashem has his cheshbon, he has the way he wants to run the world, he wants to pay you back for what you did. So that's why there's a world of resurrection. But as far as the Rambam is concerned, I don't need it. And if you serve God in order to receive that portion of the world to come, you miss the whole point of serving God. You don't understand what it's for. But according to Nachmanides and according to Chassidus, that's not the right approach. The right approach is that this thing that you call chala, even chelek la'olam haba, your portion of the world to come, even though it's sweetness and it is a reward in a certain sense, it's also the goal. You can't look at it just as a reward. You have to see it as the purpose of everything you've done. It's part of a process. And that changes the whole thing altogether. And throughout Chassidus, meaning from the Baal Shem Tov and on, everybody in Chassidus talks about the world of resurrection as part of the fulfillment of the soul. That you can't, it's not just that, Hashem has to put them together in the soul with the body, because there's no other way, like the Rambam says, to give you a reward, because the reward has to fit the action, and the action was the soul in the body. He says, no. The fact that the soul comes back into the body is because the soul can't fulfill its purpose until it has a body. And that changes everything. It's just that this body, this connection between the soul and the body is entirely sweet. It's not like the previous connection. The connection we have in this world is almost a battle, and if it's not outright a battle. And it's a very difficult connection. It's mafli la'asod. Hashem has to get involved in order to even keep it together. It's like two warring factions, and somebody's got to hold them at bay so that they can live together. But in the world to come, in the world of resurrection, they're not at each other's throat at all. They understand how they complement one another, and they come to a fulfillment of each other. Okay? So listen to this. There's a beautiful idea that's brought by the Rebbe Rayatz. And he says, it's repeated many times, and in a sense, on this mimer, the Rebbe wrote the only thing the Rebbe ever wrote, right? The Rebbe only wrote one thing. He wrote infinite things, but he only wrote one pamphlet from beginning to end that was just his writing. It's Inyana Torah Chassidus. What is it? What is the Inyan of Torah Chassidus? What does he write it on? On a very strange thing. He writes it on something that was added to Yiddishkeit in the 17th century or 16th century. Modeh Ani. Why did he choose Modeh Ani to write all of Chassidus on? Again, and he divides it into 4 levels of understanding Modeh Ani, and then the 5th level is what Chassidus adds to the understanding. And this and that. It's all really based on this mimer from the Rebbe Rayatz. And the Friediger Rebbe has a mimer that's called Reshit Arisotechem. Reshit Arisotechem. That's the mitzvah of Chala. So what does he say there? The psukim in Parshas Shlach, Reshit Arisotechem Tarimu Truma LaHashem. At the beginning of your Arisotechem is very interesting. It's called Arisot, but really what it means is Isotechem. Meaning, at the beginning of your dough, you shall make into a offering for Hashem. That's the challah that we take out. But because it's written for some reason in the Torah as arisotechem, what does arisa mean? A crib. It means a bed. So from that you learn that there's a special avoda that the beginning of all avoda during the day has to start with Hashem. Right? And the Rebbe dedicated tons to this. And you can say in a certain sense that that's what Chassidus is. Chassidus is like saying, it's not that I'm alive, and because I'm alive I owe God something, so I'll do something for Him. The whole concept of Chassidus that the Alter Rebbe explains in this Maimer is the opposite. The reason I'm alive is to serve Hashem. There's no other reason. It happens to be to stay alive, I have to do other things also. So they're the afterthought. How do you tell the difference between a person who's like this or like that? The way he wakes up. If when you wake up, your question is, so what do I need to do today to stay alive, right? And you wake up and you run in your head and you say, oh, I have to go here, I worry, all these things. That's not Hasidic thinking. But if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do, good, is and you prepare yourself for it. It's like an avoda to prepare yourself for it, to be in that mindset. You can't just, again, there has to be action involved. If you don't add action to it, then you're not changing anything. You're just, I'm thinking this way, but I don't really act that way. So you have your Nagelwasser ready near your bed. You have the towel near, and you stand up, or sorry, you sit up in bed, and you put your hands together. You say Modeh Ani, and then you wash your hands by the bed, and it's all in a state of, I'm here to do your bidding, Hashem. Okay. That's the cornerstone of Chassidus. Okay, so what does this have to do with Challah, with Chelik L'Olam Haba? So this is not written in Chabad, it's written in Breslev. But I'll quote it for you, because it's such an amazing passage that Reb Nachman wrote. This is in Torah Nun Daled. Very beginning. He writes, Ki tzrichim lishmor ma'od et hazikaron. Memory is a very important thing. Right. Not just because we get old and we lose our memory. Because memory is like your RAM on a computer. If you don't have memory, you can't work at all. But when you have memory, it's very important to fill it, because it's limited. It's very important to fill it with the right things, and not to waste it. So he says, Bechinat, sorry, Shelo yipol hashichacha. So this is a big deal in the Arizal, and I'm going to get into it. Zachor v'shichacha. The shichacha comes from choshech, from darkness, and zachor is equal to Eitz Chaim. Everything that the Arizal writes about, is tons of stuff on it. 233, very important number. Rav Yitzchak has a book on it called "The Twinkle in Your Eye," and he's trying to. It's all really wonderful things. V'yikar hazikaron hu lizkor tamid ba'alma da'ati. He says the most important thing to fill your memory with, I mean your working memory. What do you need to think about? What I'm getting from the store, what I'm doing this. The most important thing is to remember all the time the world of the resurrection. Crazy thing, he writes. When you think about it, that's what I'm supposed to think about all the time. If you're like the Rambam, you wouldn't get this. But if you're like Nachmanides, you get it perfectly. Because what is he saying? He's saying, that's the purpose of everything you're doing. Imagine that you're doing a job and you don't remember what you're doing it for. You get lost in the details. You're not going to complete it. You're not going to do it the right way.
That's what I told you, the special ways for old people. It not only tells you where you're going, it tells you why you're going.
Right. If you don't remember why you're going, so what's the point?
Right.
He says,
you don't know what to do. You know you're going to the best of leaders, but you have the faintest idea why.
So listen what he says. Uvchina zo lizkor tamid ba'olam haba. This idea of always remembering the world to come, the world of the resurrection, דהיינו להדב כמחשבתי בעלמא דעתי הוא בכלליות ובפרטיות. It's both in the general and in the particular, in the details. In the general, כך ראוי להיות מנהג יראי השם. תכף בבוקר בהקיצו, קודם שיתחיל שום דבר, יזכור מיד בעלמא דעתי. He says, when I say מודה אני, what am I saying? שחזרת בנשמתי בחמלה רבה אמונתך. This itself is like a mini resurrection of the dead, right? Because sleep is like 1/60th of death. So in a certain sense, so he says right away, it's not just like what we say in Chabad, I'm here to serve you, Hashem. I'm here to serve you because there's a purpose. And the purpose is the world of the resurrection. We're not going to get there if I don't serve you. But right away he says, when you say Moda'ani, you're thinking of, why am I saying Moda'ani? Because we're going somewhere. Meaning, right off the bat, you have the goal in mind. ואחר כך יעשה זאת בפרטיות. And then every detail that you do during the day, you should have in mind the world to come, the world of the resurrection. So what is he saying here? He's saying something that the Alter Rebbe says this many, many times. That we learned this year. We saw at least 2 Maimarim that had this. But one of them was exactly what we're going to say now. That the soul has 3 stages in its development. There's the soul the way it was before Hashem. And then it was called the Ma'ayan Ganim. I don't know if you remember this. I don't remember which Maimar. I didn't have time to look which one it was that we saw this year. Ma'ayan Ganim means that I'm a wellspring of the garden. So that's like the soul as the waters above. The water is above the earth. And it's a wellspring of water. It has a lot of potential.
I think we learned it quite recently.
Ken, it wasn't so fast, it was like 3 months ago, I think. So you have all these abilities, but the truth is that you can't come to any kind of fulfillment of all this potential. So you have to, as it were, to come down onto the earth, and that's what's called the seas. When we talked about it, we said that Tehom, the abyss, is really like the Ma'ayan Ganim, and the abyss is the abyss of the salty waters that then have to go down into the earth to be purified, and then they come out as a clean wellspring. So he says these 3 stages, that the soul is relatively like salty water now. It has tons of potential, but you have to clean it. The cleaning it is going through this world, meaning seeping through the earth, all the hard toil that we have in this world. And then it emerges on the other side. We said also in this world, there's some of it in this world, but most of it will be in the world of the resurrection. And it's the same thing. A wellspring is like something that was underground and suddenly sprouted out. And when it's sprouted out, you suddenly see that it's pure, clean water, and it can.
We learned in the mirror that what happens when it rains and the rain comes down.
Right. So that the rainwater is still not purified. That there's a difference between what we call kolchin. I can't remember what it's called, but in English it has a name. The rainwater is the overflow. I don't remember. No, I can't remember what it's called. Whatever flows on the surface of the earth itself is not clean. It's clean. It's relatively, you can drink it, but it's not the same as a river that comes from a wellspring. The difference being that after it came down, it still had some minerals in it. It wasn't clean completely, that it picks up from the atmosphere or whatever else. And then when it goes through the earth, then it's really purified. And when it comes out as a wellspring, that's when it's completely clean. So he's saying that you always have to remember that everything you're doing here is a process, is part of a process. Don't see it as an end in and of itself. If everything is a process, everything is to receive something greater at the end, it gives completely new meaning. Again, the Rambam can never say this, because for the Rambam, you can attain the end by the soul departing in the world. That's it. That's the highest level. You don't need the body for that. But to remember the world to come, like Reb Nachman writes here, that means, and it's directly from the Baal Shem Tov, there's no question. That means really that you're constantly aware of what the purpose is. That you go through these 3 stages. Okay? And that itself is what, meaning, that's what I was talking about yesterday, that the consciousness, the faith in the world to come is really the ability to remember the goal. And that's what makes the goal possible. If you don't,
Why does it have to come from the Torah?
because otherwise, if it's not coming from the Torah, says the Rebbe. Two things. It says, if it's only Torah Shebaal Peh, that's exactly what the Rambam was big on. Where's the Rambam's Perush on Chumash?
Where is the Rambam's Perush? Where is it?
Yeah. Have you read it?
No.
Why not?
Oh, yeah, I may have done, but I don't think so.
You haven't. I promise you, you haven't. Because it doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? As far as the Rambam is concerned, his book is the Perush on Chumash.
Which one? Mishnah Torah?
Yeah, that's what he says. That if you learn my book, you can read the Chumash and come to me, and you're finished. You don't need anything in between. We know what a Perush on the Chumash looks like. Nothing like what the Rambam.
Explanation of the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs.
For him, it's just the technical side. He's not interested in drushim. That he does something that's concerned, and this is the ikar is the Torah Shebaal Peh. The whole point of the Chumash is to give us Torah Shebaal Peh. Is for us to develop Torah Shebaal Peh. Says the Rebbe, if Tchias HaMesim was only in Torah Shebaal Peh, if it was only in the oral tradition, and it wasn't in the Torah itself, then the Rambam could be right. Imam says this, that the world to come, meaning the final goal, could be soul without physical being. Why? Because the difference between Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, and the oral Torah is that the written Torah is a physical object. You can't have the written Torah written on a computer. It doesn't work. Maimonides you can put on the computer, it's just as good. Mishnah Torah on the computer is just as fine as Mishnah Torah in the book. There's no difference between the two. But the Torah, even give me a picture on the screen, it doesn't mean anything. I need to have the physical object. So says the Rebbe, that's what happens when you say that you have to believe in the resurrection from the Torah. That the source of the resurrection is in the Torah. Because then it means that the body is not just, the physical existence in the resurrection is not just an afterthought. It's not just superfluous and you can get rid of it at the end. It says it's part of it. It's mamish part of it. It's an incredible answer. I think it's a beautiful answer.
Excellent.
Okay. So see you in Sukkot.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly how.
We'll figure it out.
Let's see with the kids.
We have minyan here at 8 o'clock every day.
You done?
Not in my house, but downstairs. Why don't you come?
From?
They're from people. Why don't you come down here? So we can learn at 7. We'll go down there.
I don't know if it's going to work out because we're going to be going to Fabranians. We're going to be going to concerts. We're going to be like 12, 1, 2 o'clock.
We can learn after.
Now you're talking.
So we'll
We
daven.
can do something else.
They'll finish at 9:50 and 9:20. And then we can learn.
We could also do something else.
What else?
The daven in...
No, but I
In
promised
session.
I'd come here.
Oh, okay. Because the daven in session at 8:30. And I was thinking we could learn there.
It'll be 8:30
Cool.
anyway.
Where?
Here also. We can start at 8:15.
Okay, so if it's a day when, the night before has been normal,
Yeah,
inverted
then it's
commas,
easy.
then it's easy. I have to wait and see because I don't know what their plans are.
Okay.
They don't tell me their plans.
Figure it
They
out.
tell nothing.
ושמחת בחגך והויסח שמח ושמחת בחגך והויסח שמח ילה 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 ay 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 la 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 ay la 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 ay la ay la ay la la ay la 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 ay la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay 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 la 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 ay ay ay